Hello and welcome to Diplomatic Channel. I'm Amarachi Ubani. This week on the program, a focus on India-Nigeria relations. The Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar is in Nigeria on the second leg of his two-nation tour in Africa, beginning in the Ugandan capital, Kampala. He co-chairs the 6th India-Nigeria Joint Commission meeting with his counterpart, the Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Yusuf Tugar, in Abuja. He will also be inaugurating the third edition of the Nigeria-India Business Council meeting. On Sunday, he was at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, the NIIA, to speak on the theme, Resetting the Global Agenda, the Role of India and the Global South. We'll have more on this later. Plus, ahead of Foreign Minister Jaishankar's visit to Nigeria, I had a chat with the Indian High Commissioner to Nigeria, Gangadharan Balasubramanian, on the future of Nigeria-India relations. That's Diplomatic Channel in a wrap. Let's check in on those other discussions in diplomatic circles, and we'll be right back.
The Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yusuf Tugar, says there is need to democratize the United Nations Security Council and that Nigeria, with its population, economic size and strategic role in Africa, has earned the right to be part of the UN Security Council. He said this during a panel discussion at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Tugar said the UN Security Council, as instituted, is not living up to its purpose and collectively needs to practice what it preaches. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will be visiting some African countries this week to build on the December 2022 U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit and to expand fast-growing economic development and security partnerships across Africa. Mr. Blinken is scheduled to visit Cabo Verde, Côte d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and Angola.
Excellencies,
Finally, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says the Palestinian people's right to establish a sovereign state must be recognized by all. He made the address on the sidelines of the 19th Non-Aligned Movement Summit in Kampala over the weekend.
people are dying not only from bombs and bullets, but from lack of food and clean water, hospitals without power and medicine, and grueling journeys to even smaller slivers of land to escape the fighting. This must stop. I will not relent in my call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. To accept the two-state solution for Israelis and Palestinians and the denial of the right to statehood for the Palestinian people are unacceptable. These would indefinitely prolong a conflict that has become a major threat to global peace and security, exacerbate polarization, and embolden extremists everywhere. The right of the Palestinian people to build their own state must be recognized by all. The world's preeminent platform for resolving global disputes is paralyzed by geopolitical divisions that block effective solutions. Your movement has long highlighted the Council's systemic shortcomings and the need for reforms to make it truly effective and representative. How can we accept that the African continent still lacks a single permanent member?
Welcome back. The Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar gave a very impressive speech at Nigeria's international relations think tank, the NIIA, in Lagos, before embarking on his visit to the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. His special address and lecture was on the topic, Resetting the Global Agenda, the Role of India and the Global South. Here's more.
Our relationship, that between India and Nigeria, predates the independence of Nigeria. Our diplomatic presence was set up in Lagos in 1958. And even before that, there were generations of Nigerians who had known Indian teachers, who had known Indian traders, who had a connect with India before there was a formal diplomatic one. But after independence, there were other methods and other facets of this connection. As we went about our nation building, our militaries collaborated. The National Defense Academy at Kaduna is a symbol of our army cooperation, just as the Naval War College at Port Harcourt is an example of our naval cooperation. And over the decades, we've actually had a lot of toing and froing of meeting of minds. I discovered, have friends who have spent time here in various capacities. And in fact, in many ways, we hold up Nigeria as an example of our international technical and education cooperation program, because the alumni of that program have actually done the relationship very proud over many years. Now, as the world became more globalized, this relationship also acquired other dimensions, some building on the past, some reflecting the new. And one of them today is the presence of an Indian community of, I believe, about 60,000 people who are a living bridge between our two countries, who serve the relationship in multiple ways and who ensure that while politics come and go, while economic changes happen, that link between our two societies remains strong and remains steady. Whether we speak about our domestic policies at home or whether today we debate international relations abroad, the simple principle that must guide global governance, global conversations, global debates is a conviction that no one should be left behind. And when we speak about no one being left behind, I think the welfare of Africa is particularly important. I would say the rise of Africa is even more crucial, because in a changing global order, we have seen growth in continents once they got decolonized. That growth over a period of time created a rebalancing, a political rebalancing and economic rebalancing. And that rebalancing today is creating a world of a multipolar nature, where, as His Excellency said, middle powers and perhaps others too, regional organizations, would have a fairer and more equitable say in how the world is run. So the global agenda, in many ways, today is about restoring the world to its natural diversity. Because the world was diverse, the world is diverse, it was distorted by the period of Western domination. And in a post-colonial world today, restoring that natural diversity is actually our collective objective. Now, what are the challenges to that process? One, of course, is while many of us attained independence, we have all built our nations and societies. The reality is also that the old domination has not let go. That in different ways, it may not be the imperialism of the 19th and early 20th century, but in different ways, today, many of those who dominated the world for the last 200 to 300 years continue to do so with new instruments, with new regimes, with different techniques. And how do we contest that? How do we overcome that? How do we make sure the world is a fairer place? That is challenge number one. Challenge number two is of a more recent vintage. We have, for the last 3 decades, spoken about globalization. Globalization has been a game changer. Some people argue that there was always globalization. People always moved from one place to another. That is correct. After all, people moved from Africa to other parts of the world. That's how the globe became the globe. But globalization today has a very specific sense. It is a combination of economics, of interdependence, of interpenetration, of a shared common dependence on technology, of a degree of mobility that we have never experienced before. Now, while globalization has had many positive results, it has also undeniably led to very deep economic concentrations. That much of the world today depends on production of a few geographies. Now, it worked when we believed that the entire world could be run in the manner in which Japanese cars are produced in Nagoya, that everything came just in time to meet the requirements of the day. We were wrong, but we didn't know it. And then COVID came. And COVID brought home to every one of us that the most basic things of our life, we were often dependent on suppliers and producers from far away. Not just dependent on them, as we discovered during COVID, we were hostage to them. That many of us struggled with masks and gloves and PPEs and ventilators and basic medicines and vaccines. We struggled for food. So, one of the big takeaways from the COVID experience is our world today needs to be de-risked from the over-concentration. That if we speak about a more balanced world, a more democratic world, democratic is not just political democratic. It is not just the rights of different nations. Democratic also means every region, sometimes every large country, must have within its own grasp the basics of its production so that it is economically and socially secure. This is our challenge number 2. Challenge number 3, of course, is the setting of narratives. And I spoke about the old domination. The old domination today doesn't tell you what to do with a stick. The old domination will tell you what to do through social media, through regular media, through devising what is politically correct, to setting standards. And this narrative setting is actually a very powerful force today in international relations. There are thinking, there are ideologies, there are regimes which are raised up, brought down, made irrelevant, brought to the center through narrative setting. In all of this, of course, we have the challenges of the polarization of the world. We in India know it particularly strongly and recently because we struggled with it during our G20 presidency. That a conflict such as one taking place in Ukraine has polarized the East and the West. That developmental issues have polarized the North and the South. So, how do we today talk of a global agenda when the globe itself is so divided? That is a challenge in itself. There are, of course, the traditional, what are called global issues. These are challenges which threaten every nation, but are bigger than what could be contained within the borders. So it could be terrorism, a challenge which I know Nigeria has had to experience in its own way, like we have had to in a different way. Or maritime security, piracy. Challenges, of course, of climate events that we are seeing more and more frequently. So these are some of the challenges that we have to overcome if we have to really get along with the global agenda. Some, as I said, are traditional, some have evolved, some are more recent. When I spoke about globalization and concentration, a different challenge emerging out of that is how globalization itself has been weaponized. That today, currency is a weapon, trade is a weapon, tourism is a weapon. That dominant players, they may be dominant as producers, they may be dominant as consumers, that they often, with very little hesitation, leverage their market shares on the global system for their particular national purpose.
And what is interesting is that this week, India celebrates another Republic Day, a celebration that came into effect on January 26, 1950. It replaced the Government of India Act 1935 as the governing document of India, turning the nation from a dominion into a republic separate from the rule of the British Crown on the Indian subcontinent, also known as the British Raj. Nigeria and India have enjoyed warm, friendly relations, deeply rooted bilateral relations as well. India establishing its diplomatic house in Lagos back in November 1958. That's 2 years before Nigeria became independent in October 1960. In my interview with the current High Commissioner, Gangandharan Balasubramanian, we discuss relations now and in the future. High Commissioner Gangandharan Balasubramanian, thank you so much for joining me on Diplomatic Channel.
Thank you very much for having me on your channel, and let me take this opportunity to wish all your viewers a very happy New Year 2024 and many, many years ahead. Thank you.
Yes, and also to wish you a happy Independence Day ahead for India. It's at the end of this month, January 26th, I believe.
Republic Day, yes. 26th January is our Republic Day.
Yes. Big congratulations to you. Let's begin, and I really want to thank you for joining me on this auspicious occasion. It's just ahead of the Foreign Minister's visits to Nigeria. How are you anticipating His Excellency's visit to the country, coming after so many years?
We consider it as a very important visit. India and Nigeria have wonderful relations at the political level, economic level, people-to-people contact. And as you perhaps know, India had started its diplomatic office relations with Nigeria 2 years before your independence, in 1958, by opening a diplomatic office in Lagos, which was then the capital. From then, we have been nurturing this relationship, a very special relationship between our two countries. Our political leaders have invested on both sides. They have invested their political capital in making sure that the relationship between India and Nigeria is very solid and is very close. So, in that connection, the last visit of our Prime Minister was in 2007. Subsequently, both President Buhari has visited in 2015, and we had the wonderful visit of His Excellency President Tinubu to India to attend the G20 summit last year in September. My Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who is visiting here, will be coming here for the Joint Commission meeting. And because of COVID and other reasons, for the past about few years, we have not been able to convene this meeting. The Joint Commission meeting is something which takes an overview. The two ministers of Foreign Affairs, from my side, Dr. Jaishankar, and from the Nigerian side, His Excellency Mr. Tuggar, both of them would be reviewing the relationship between our two countries in all aspects. So it's a very important relationship. As I told you, India attaches a lot of importance to its relations with Nigeria, and we look forward to having Dr. Jaishankar further solidify through the review with his counterpart, Mr. Tuggar, the relationship between our two countries.
I remember that, as you rightly mentioned, President Tinubu was at the G20 summit in India in September. Nigeria's Minister for Trade and Investment, Doris Nkiruka Uzokanite, spoke glowingly of this partnership between Nigeria and India. A number of agreements were signed at that meeting between Nigerian businessmen and Indian businessmen following President Tinubu's uh, uh, pitch, I would say, a very lovely pitch there, informing Indian businessmen that the hiccups have been removed. Nigeria is a great place to invest and all of that. Would you say that there's been a slight uptick, in trade investment in Nigeria by Indian businessmen following that visit by the Nigerian president to the G20?
You're absolutely right. When His Excellency President Tinubu visited India, he had in his delegation major five ministers were there, six ministers were there, and there was a large business delegation that also accompanied His Excellency. During the visit, there were many meetings that were organized in India on the sidelines of the G20 summit between the businesses also, and they encompassed almost every aspects of our relationship. Indian businesses are not new to Nigeria. For the past about 40, 50 years, Indian businesses have made Nigeria as their home into various manufacturing sectors, starting from plastics to automobiles to pharmaceuticals to you name it, and they are into every sector here. When I came in about a year and a half back, there were about 135 Indian companies, and I'm glad to say that this year we made a count and it is about 155 today. During the visit of His Excellency President Tinubu, there was an agreement between both sides after the businesses met that about $14 billion would be invested. Earlier investments were to the tune of about $19.3 billion. Another $14 billion were promised during the visit. And I'm really happy to see and state to you and to your viewers that immediately after the return of the delegation from India, in the month of October itself, 7 billion out of those 14 billion that were promised were signed. So that is a remarkable achievement. And so the total investment by Indian businesses in India approximately is close to about $27 billion. We anecdotally say that Indian businesses are the second largest employers after the Nigerian government. So that is the interaction between our businesses in Nigeria. And we also have lot many trade and other economic relations from Nigeria to India. Nigeria is one of the largest suppliers of oil to India. So I would certainly be very positive, and the future looks very bright that the trade and economic relations, investments by Indian companies have certainly been on an uptick thanks to the visit that was organized by His Excellency President Tinubu last year along with businessmen.
Hi, Commissioner. I cannot end this interview without congratulations to you and to the rest of India. Just in the last few months, India successfully landed a rocket on the moon. It was a great feat for the country. We actually watched it here live, and it was incredible, to see, the pride on people's faces, the joy. What such a great feat! India has been strived to be part of the leadership in science, technology, in medicine, and all of that. Is that something you hope that you could help replicate in other countries, even here?
I'm sure we would be. As I told you, we believe in the concept of both Vasudeva Kudumbakam, which means whole world is one family, and also shared growth and shared prosperity. Even earlier, for SARC, which is one of the South Asian Association of Regional Countries, we had a SARC satellite, BIMSTEC satellite, which India had jointly worked with them for weather prediction and so on and so forth. With Nigeria, we also have an agreement between NASADA and ISRO. Two working group meetings have already been undertaken, and we are very happy to see the progress of how we are cooperating in the field of space also. So we, as Government of India, as India, our leadership is committed to ensure that when we grow together.
So good to hear that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. Indian High Commissioner to Nigeria, Gangandharan Balasubramanian. Thank you again for joining me on Diplomatic Channel. And once again, a huge Congratulations and happy Republic Day ahead.
Thank you very much and namaste from India.
We've come to the end of the program this week. My social media handles are still open in case you want to leave a comment or you want to ask a question. At Amarachi Ubani on Instagram, Ubani Amarachi on Facebook, and Amarachi_Ubani on X. Leave a comment or ask a question if you're watching on YouTube. I'll see you next time.